off on this journey, I said we're going to have a very collaborative, transparent process, and we're going to have several meetings, and we're going to do everything we can to examine the issues, examine the options, and make sure that the public is informed and has as many opportunities as possible to participate in this. So I appreciate you coming. The purpose is to discuss the options considered to address the financial stability of the city and answer questions about the chosen path forward. The format for this, I'll provide some very brief remarks and perspective from my position as the mayor. I'll hand this off to the council for any comments that they would like to make as they deliberated and decided on the path forward from their perspective. And we quickly want to get to the questions and answers from the community, because some of you may be hearing about this for the first time. Some of you may be well informed and still have some questions and like some answers, and we wanted to provide another opportunity for that. So after those remarks are done, we will have a format providing questions and answers. There'll be little cards that you can sign up and say that you want to speak, and that way we'll track and make sure we keep everyone in order and give you an opportunity to ask your questions and have them be answered. And this meeting is being recorded, and it needs to be no more than 2 hours. Those are the restrictions we're working with. Since this isn't a formal council meeting, we're not going to call roll. I was just telling the council this, but for the record, all council members are present, and I just ask you to briefly introduce yourself to the community for those that may not know who you are. Councilmember Westman.
That's it, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Westman.
And I'm Linda Jordan.
John Ehrenreich.
Any coffee?
Mike Courts.
Larry Wilcox.
Kathleen Trotter.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, the focus of this meeting is on providing financial stability for our city. And when I came into office, I had a short amount of time to figure out how we're going to address this and move forward as quickly as possible and collaboratively as possible. And the reason this is important is because I love this community. I'm vested in this community, just like many of you are. We have a daughter. I have a wife. I have a son that I'm expecting in December. It's a very exciting time for our family. And whether I'm a council member or a mayor or just no longer serving and just a citizen, all of those roles are important. And I plan on being here for a long time and being an active part of this community. And so the future of our community as we look forward is very important to me in all of those capacities, as a husband and as a father and as a council member and now as a mayor. When I talked with some of the business community earlier, I asked them, I said, why did you locate here? Why DuPont? And they talk about the easy access to I-5. They talk about the sweeping views of Puget Sound. They talk about all the developable land, the miles of parks, and the miles of trails that we have. There's so many reasons that we love this community. For me, I love to walk with my dog and go around on some of these parks and these trails. I love to take my daughter and we go down to Sequatchie Lake and we throw rocks out into the water. There's so many things to do. There's so many reasons to love the community. And we're at a crossroads right now. We have a revenue problem in the city. And the truth is that we no longer have the revenue coming in from the rapid development and expansion that this city has experienced over the years. We've had exponential growth, and we now have to face the costs for providing services for a city that's now nearly 8,500 people and projected to grow to 12,000. We're not a city of 200 homes anymore. And as I looked at opportunities and options to provide financial stability for the city, I listened to options of the citizens, I listened to the options of the businesses, and I listened to several experts in many facets of different expertise and different fields. And the solution that I landed on personally after doing a lot of listening and a lot of thinking was a solution that was simple, that was equitable, and that was sustainable. And the result of that was a temporary property tax increase that does two things. It bridges the gap where other options will be available in 2019 that aren't currently available to us. And the second is to maintain public safety services and the infrastructure that they rely upon. We have 3 firefighters that are on a grant that if we don't find another funding option, we will lose those firefighters. As I listened to folks, they said, you know, Mayor, that's fine and well, but you're short on public works staff. You're short on police. There's police shifts that only have one shift. We should do more. We should increase some of the services that we have, not just do the bare minimum of maintaining what we have. I agree with them. I don't think it's feasible. So the path forward that I provided, as I said, was simple, stable, and sustainable. And it bridges the gap to another opportunity where more options are available, helping us maintain the quality of life and the public safety services and the infrastructure that they depend upon today. We've talked about this in several meetings, and as I said, I wanted to have one other opportunity for us to come forward, share my reasoning, be available to share my reasoning behind my recommendation, have the council provide their reasoning or their recommendation and their deliberations, and be available to answer questions. And one question that I get a lot is that I'll just answer right off the bat, which I'm sure someone will ask, is why are you not taxing business? Why have the residents bear this burden? And the truth is I am taxing business in my proposal. Now granted, it's not my decision to make, it's all of yours, but by temporarily increasing the property tax, businesses here in DuPont and the residents will all pay an increase in their property tax. They will all help provide that bridge to sustain by maintaining public safety services and the infrastructure that we depend upon. So as we keep moving forward together, looking forward and really deciding what we want our community to be, what services that we want and need for the 8,500 people that now live here, and what we want the future of our community to look like, we have some decisions to make. And those decisions rest with you. And we want you to make the most informed decisions possible and have, again, as I said, an opportunity to ask questions and receive answers. So feel free to ask me anything. Feel free to ask the council anything. And with that, I'll turn it over to the council to make any comments that you'd like to make. And I will just generally be up here to A, answer questions, and B, kind of facilitate this discussion. So with that, council, any comments?
I might as well start out. Once again, I'm Linda Jordan. I've lived here in DuPont for well over 16 years. When I first came, there were a few more than 600 people that lived in the whole city. And so I've seen changes over the last 16 plus years that are just amazing. I had no idea I would see what I have. When I started living here, most of DuPont wasn't built. Most of it was trees and dirt. And to watch it grow to the fine city that we have, that's clean and beautiful and safe, has just literally filled my heart with joy about this city. And I personally don't want to see the quality of life here eroded in any way, because we don't want to step forward to keep the quality that we have. So I'm hoping that we all give a lot of thought to what we want to see in the future for DuPont. Thanks.
Yeah, Councilmember Westman. Another significant event in DuPont took place in January, and that was the decision on the settlement agreement. The council made that decision on a split vote. On November of this year, you're going to have on the ballot a tax measure, and you will have to make the decision, not council. And in that decision process, hopefully you will consider the facts that you are receiving from the city, that you consider the facts that you are receiving from interest groups, consider the facts from your friends and neighbors, and above all, consider the facts that you are carrying around in your own brain in mind. Now, this meeting is not a debate this evening. The goal is for factual information. And I'm sure that every council member here, if asked, will give you a justification for their vote. I was the only one who voted in the negative. And at some point in time in this evening, if you wish to hear that explanation, my rationale for that, so be it. Council members?
Actually, I'd like to hear that right now. I'd like to hear that right now, Roger.
I will attempt to deal factually rather than so much having to do with opinion or on emotion. Again, it's a fact that I did not support the levy lift when it was before council for a vote. I do not support it at the present time, and I'm not campaigning. That's not my intention. In my opinion, the amount of the opposed increase is just too heavy of a burden upon the residential family owner. A modest request would have been acceptable, and I express that as a matter of fact in explaining my opinion when the time came for that vote. Since 2010, and this is a fact, the administrative staff and council was aware of the budget shortfall. And that shortfall was in the city's obligations, primarily for the mortgage debt. Instead of identifying new sources of income or evaluating the appropriateness of current resources, if they're current and up to date, the city leadership chose, and we have a history, of cutting staff, reducing salaries, and eliminating some services in order to budget the budget. Now, we all realize that it is a fact that the budget is broken. It is unbalanced now and will continue to be so in future years unless aggressive action is taken now. The shortfall continues to grow. Now, the proposed levy lift, again, it's difficult to separate opinion from fact, but it's the fact that I have the opinion, I guess I could say that, that it does put a heavy burden upon the residential homeowner. And I'm not attempting to belittle the comments that the mayor said earlier, having to do with the businesses carrying a share. They are property owners. We also have businesses that are not property owners, but are renters. What is the fair share for large corporations that reside here in DuPont? We have large corporations with headquarters buildings. We have distribution centers. We have financial institutions. We have large apartment complexes. We have mining operations that are extracting mineral resources within the city of DuPont. The state has also authorized certain revenue-producing means by which cities can increase their revenue base. The mayor has proposed a revenue plan, or at least suggested that the city develop a revenue plan. A revenue plan that would reform or perhaps study the different tax bases. In 2010 is when the shortfall was first noted, and that would have been a great time by which we would deal with that situation and not having to go to a property tax increase. It is a fact that there are other cities in Washington as well as elsewhere where they too are struggling with meeting mortgage debt. And we are all facing a very difficult time. Some of those have chosen a different route than asking for a property tax increase upon the property owners. They have chosen to pursue an avenue that is more legally and in the parameter of judicial courts, and perhaps pursuing the avenue upon defaulting upon that, which then would require action within the courts. So default is an option. It is common, it is being done elsewhere. This council, by majority vote, as well as the mayor, said that default is not an option. Well, tell that to some of the other cities that are pursuing this. So my concern is that we are faced with a financial situation, and this is an avenue upon which this council, by a majority vote, decided to pursue. Again, I ask you to weigh the facts that you receive from different sources. Thank you.
So, as you have, Mr. Deason, as we talked, I understand there's a difference between campaigning and the city's legal obligation to inform the voters, to provide information and to explain why they chose the action that they chose. So if I cross that line, I hope you give me the hook.
Good evening. I'm Bruce Deason, and I'm serving as the city attorney this evening. And as council members just pointed out, you cannot use public facilities for the purpose of campaigning for or against a ballot issue. But it is an appropriate responsibility for your government to provide you with factual information so that you can make an informed decision when you cast your ballot. Sorry. I said it is appropriate for your government to provide you with factual information so that you can make an informed vote, should you choose to do so. A discussion of past actions or an explanation of past actions does not constitute advocacy for or against. It's merely an explanation of events that have already occurred. It is only if the mayor or council urge you to act in a particular way that advocacy occurs, and the law says they are not to do that. So I will endeavor to sit down and be quiet, but in the event someone should cross the line, I will blow my whistle, call a halt, and we'll start over.
So you'll be as quiet as all lawyers are. Yeah, okay.
If he holds up the red card, we're in trouble.
Yeah, definitely.
Two red cards and you're out.
So the what I'd like to go over is my take, and I've said this to many folks before, but I would like to go over it again if I could. Each of us up here in the council has a slightly different twist, or maybe a greater different twist on exactly what is the situation, and in the end, it all probably adds up to the same thing. But for me, I've always been uncomfortable with structuring the problem as if it was the main root and only root of the cause was the Civic Center. I don't think that's correct. In fact, it isn't correct when you consider that the debt related to the Civic Center is a general obligation of the city, regardless of of the source of the payments. It's an obligation of the city, just like any of the services that the city provides. The fact of the matter is we have a structural imbalance between revenues and expenditures. It's just that simple. Right now, the revenues have fallen off. Costs have been, we've done the best we can, as Councilmember Westman pointed out. We've made a lot of cuts early on in order to try to get it in front of the problem, but the revenues have not returned. There are three basic causes of the structural problem. The first was increased cost to provide city services. And I'll go through that in a minute here. Increased levels of service. There are levels of service that the city has provided that were not originally intended with the last tax increase that occurred back in 2003. And finally, the recession's impact on the city's revenues. A lot of the city's revenues are economy-based. In other words, they fluctuate with the economy, and I don't need to tell you what happened with the economy over the last, since 2008, and a lot of those revenues fell off the edge of the table and went through the floor. The city, as I said, has been cutting costs for the last 3 years, but we can't continue to cut without significantly impacting the services, the basic services that we provide you. And the question that you have is, do you want to continue to cut now that we've cut those services, or do you want to provide some revenue? The property tax increase that you have before you is the revenue proposal. And it's a property tax because, in the council's opinion, a property tax is a stable, equitable, and simple tax. And in the end, what we want to do is try to improve the stability of the city's revenue structure. But in the end, if I can leave you with one thought, that would be that the city must correct the structural imbalance. I think everybody up here is committed to that thought. And essentially the options are increase revenues or cut services. And if the proposed property tax fails, then we will cut services because we are committed to restoring the structure, the structural balance of the city. So the cost to provide city services increased over the last 9 years since the last major tax increase, as I said, in 2003. The voters approved a $1.32 property tax levy, and the cost of city services has risen by a lot. You all know what inflation is. A lot of people use this Consumer Price Index, the CPI, or OFM uses the Personal Consumption Expenditure Report. I think the most appropriate index to use is the state and local implicit price deflator that the state and local government implicit price deflator that is published by the Bureau of Economic Analysis. You can find that. If you look at that, in 2003, the rise between 2003 and now is about 40%, meaning that the inflation rate that's faced local government has been about 40%. And a large chunk of that has come because there's a lot of the costs that go with wages that the city cannot control. Pensions, workman's compensation, unemployment insurance, health insurance to a certain degree. We've switched plans. We've made the city's employees pay a larger portion of their health costs, but it's still rising very, very fast. I think anybody who signs the front of a paycheck knows what I mean by that. I swear that wasn't my heart. The Civic Center itself was also an increase of cost. The cost of the Civic Center has also been an increased cost of providing services. But it is, in fact, a cost of providing a service. City Council didn't just wake up one morning and say, hey, gang, let's build a Civic Center. The need to build this Civic Center was recognized decades ago. It appears in the 1995 comp plan as a little square on the plan. It was actually somewhat to the west of here, closer to Old Fort Lake. But it was recognized at the time that a city that was of 600 people, that the facilities that were there to serve that city of 600 people are not going to be adequate to serve a city that is now 8,500 people. And as I say, it's a cost of doing business. Everybody who has employees or works in some place or other knows that you have to provide a place for your employees that's functional for them to work. Most of you, if you work in an office building, you wonder why your employer did that. Well, that's because that's what's expected. And it's the same here. We have to provide place for our employees to work. And the condition of the buildings at the time that we made the finally, after a long process, very public process in which many of you had an opportunity to participate, we chose a course of action to build this civic center. I was at the Parks and Recreation fundraising event earlier in May, and I asked our former mayor, Steve Young, back then what he thought about all this ruckus over the costs of the Civic Center and surrounding it. Mayor Young led us through, very ably, led us through the process of building the Civic Center, the planning and everything else, and he, in his usual way, turned to me very bluntly and said, "John, just remember it was the right thing to do at the time." You remember that, Steve? And you're right, it was. I put this Civic Center firmly in the column of a success. We had to build it. There's no question that we had to build it, and it is providing exactly the services that the city set out for it to provide. It is not a place where we bought a whole bunch of buildings, tore them down, and now we have a hole in the ground in debt that is not being serviced. It's not a convention center that is not producing. It is, in fact, providing every bit of the service we had intended for it to provide. But as I say, it's a cost of doing business. It represents, if you were to try to express the debt service, which is about $1.2 million a year, in property tax terms, it would be about $1, the full debt service here. But because we have other sources of revenue, including REIT taxes, including fire mitigation funds, and other sources, we are able to, the debt service on this would be around 70 cents if you were, 75 cents if you were to try to express it in property tax terms. But it's a cost of doing business, and it's one of the reasons why, but it is not the only reason why we have to raise property tax. It's not the only reason that we have the structural imbalance. In addition, in the 2003, when the last property tax was put in place, there was an assumed level of services that were being provided at that time that did not include parks, or we did not have the 4 major parks that we have now. In 2007, we took on 4 new parks. We took on Clock Tower Park, which up to that point had been operated and maintained by Quadrant. We took on Powderworks Park, we took on Ross Plaza, and we took on Chief Leschi Park at the top of Hoffman Hill. We also put forward at that time a property tax increase to pay for park maintenance and the greenways, and that failed, 75 cents. So increased levels of service. We also have been slowly building a more professional workforce. At the time that council came on in about 2003, we were having significant turnover in the fire department. This was just a year after the heroin incident. We had an interim finance director. We weren't passing our audits. We had we had our 4th mayor in a year. We had we were on our 11th council member in a year, when we were a 5-member council. And there was just a heck of a lot of city turnover, and at the time, we were advised that we needed to develop old growth. And what the individual was referring to was staff who had been on salary for quite some time, or been on the city, been working for the city for quite some time. And the mayor went and stole away from University Place Don Masco. Don, are you here? Yeah, Don Masco, financial wizard, who started putting us back on track for financial. We now pass our audits. We exercise good oversight, and we have a stable workforce. We have outstanding leadership. Both of our chiefs, our fire chief and our police chief, are outstanding. We have an outstanding and a more experienced public works crew. We have a much more experienced city staff. And finally, we did transition to a professional fire department. That by itself I know is controversial, and not everybody agrees with that decision, but we did, and that was an increased cost of doing business. So we have increased costs of doing business as one of the primary drivers. Another one is the variable tax revenues that I mentioned. A lot of the city's taxes, such as the REIT taxes, real estate excise tax, so every time a house sells, 1% of the value of the real estate goes to the city. And as well as the B&O taxes, those are very much revenue or economy driven. Utility taxes, sales and use taxes, all of those things fell off rather dramatically with the falling of the economy. The reason we chose the property tax is a property tax is a stable source of revenue and is not dependent on the level of economic activity. It's in the nature of how it's calculated. It is simple because it's just a rate increase. You're having to already write a check for property taxes. The city assessor doesn't have to do anything, and we don't have to hire additional staff in order to administer the tax. It's equitable because it's a broad-based tax. Everybody pays in proportion to their investment in the city, in property. And unlike a B&O tax where those who vote, the residents, are placing a tax on those who don't vote, the businesses. We don't have a lot of retail activity in this city, and we're probably never going to have retail activity like Puyallup does, or Fife with those auto sales, or Tacoma. And we're going to have to be more dependent on a property tax if we're going to pay our bills. So that's the reason we came forward with a property tax. So as I said, the council has been fairly unanimous in its determination to fix this structural imbalance. And we view this problem, I would say, I understand not 100%, but I think the majority of the council does view this as the choices are we either raise revenues or we cut services. This property tax proposal is the revenue proposal, and if it fails, we will cut services. So, and I think that's the most important thing for you all to remember tonight from anything that I have to say.
A little perspective, John touched on a little bit where we came from, but I just want to mention a few words. Mice, rats, and spiders. This is what we were dealing with on a continual basis. We had a fire department the building wasn't intended to have sleeping quarters in it. We were continually having to fumigate that building, and it got so bad that we had to rent a trailer to bring into the parking lot for the firefighters to sleep in at night. Finally, the building up on Hoffman Hill on Shaw Street was built, and the firefighters moved up there. But that left an imbalance in response times for the rest of the city. The old City Hall has about 4,400 square feet in it. About 2/3 of that is in the old council chambers, foyer, storage areas, IT, kitchen, bathrooms. In the remaining area, we squished about 14 employees and their equipment into the rest of that room. The planning department of 3 was housed in a temporary trailer behind the city hall. That was about 500 square feet with no bathroom. The police department was housed in a rented cinder building, block building that used to be the old post office and is now the barber shop. That was about 800 square feet. All of these buildings, we had to contend with rodents. And we felt that it was not only because of...
the city council.
Right. Yeah, the city council, you know, we just moved on. But, you know, the conditions weren't as favorable as they needed to be. And concurrency is also part of the reason why we have to build the new facilities, meet our requirements to service our employees and the community. So I hope that you understand that the need for these facilities was there. And we did spend about a year going through a needs assessment with a professional to come to the conclusions that we made and where we are here today.
Good evening. I'm Mike Kortz, one of the new members of the council. Linda and I together have the benefit of coming on the council this year and do not share all of the experience and history with some of this that the rest of the council does, and so we're somewhat dependent on their level of expertise. But first, let me thank you all for coming tonight. You could be watching a great Monday night football game. Thank goodness we didn't do this next week or nobody would be here. Or you could come out here. And I know there are varying positions in this room and different opinions, and some of them we are polar opposites on this issue, and that's fair. But what's important is that you're here, and I thank you for that regardless of whatever your position is, because you've taken the time out of your evening to come here and participate in this, and that's important. When we stop doing that, it doesn't matter, you know, what we want to do. We're just too apathetic to go on. You know, I joined the council this January, fairly naive about the workings of city government, and it's been a very vertical learning curve. My wife and I became residents of DuPont 4 years ago next week, where we built our retirement home, and we're here because, well, 20 years ago, my sister moved to this fair city and was one of the early residents of Northwest Landing. In 2001, my parents moved to this city, and I'd always thought I'd retire in Lakewood. They don't have sidewalks. They don't have a lot of things, actually. And as I watched through my military career, coming back here for leaves and visiting my family, I saw this magnificent town springing up from a place that I knew in high school as sort of a little backwater place that, you know, wasn't quite sure what happened in DuPont, to becoming, you know, what we call it as Pleasantville. And I watched this thing grow. I watched it get built. And Robbie and I said, you know, this is a place we want to be. And we feel very blessed and fortunate to have been able to establish our roots here and don't plan to leave. So as I embarked on this task, and as I've beaten up the mayor about this, I said, first thing that happens is you throw a settlement agreement in our lap in the first 2 weeks in, and then you drop this bill in our lap. Thanks. How about some nice, easy Mayberry RFD tasks to work in? You know, let's plan a party or something. Too easy. Yeah, too easy. But it is what it is. And so I wanted to inform myself. I volunteered to serve on his finance committee, and that was a fascinating experience. There again, you have a group of citizens, some of them whom I absolutely disagree with. But the reality is they spent a lot of time here, and they informed themselves. And there is a lot of information out there, and we're living proof that the same set of information, honest people of good intent can come to different conclusions about. And that's fair, and that's the challenge that we all will face this November when we each privately make a decision about what course of action we want to pursue. As your council member, as we followed the Financial Committee meeting, we followed the Town Hall meeting, and all of those were very valuable processes. We informed each other. The council was informed. We got to peel some skin back on the onion. We went down some rabbit trails. We came out other trails. But we looked at this thing. We held it up. We chewed on it. We looked at it. We bounced it off the wall. And now we're here. I supported the levy in my vote. And I did that for several reasons. First of all, I hate taxes. I'm absolutely not convinced the government has a better idea how to spend my money than I do. But what I hate worse than taxes is the idea of the city of DuPont becoming an unincorporated housing development, or a place with beautiful homes and abandoned parks and inadequate public safety. And that's my concern. That's what I see as I look down. As we looked at the options, how do you raise revenues? I think John very eloquently covered it better than I could, a revenue imbalance, and I won't go back over that. But as we discussed it, I came to an understanding of why a property tax is more stable than other forms of revenue. We fix a dollar amount, and then the actual tax on all the property here fluctuates to meet the dollar amount. So the city establishes what it needs, and that tax rate will adjust accordingly, unlike other forms of tax, which are very volatile. And I agree with John that we're not Fife, we're not Renton. You know, it'd be nice if Boeing built a few airplanes here and we could just pick up the scraps from that. We're not Puyallup. We are, in many ways, a bedroom community. And we have some assets here, some more office-type assets than manufacturing assets. So the huge sales, those types of revenue, those aren't ours. That's not here. But we have some valuable property. We currently have the lowest property tax rate in Pierce County, the absolute lowest. Yet we have a beautiful city. We have adequate services. I think we've cut too far, but I understand how we got there. And so as I looked at our tax rate, I looked at the median tax rate, and I looked at our level of services. I said, well, one of two things has happened. Either we are absolutely the smartest people in Pierce County, or there's something we don't know, or something we're not accounting for. And what the reality is, we did live off that bow wave of development funds for the last dozen years. There was a lot of money plowed back into the city that well has dried up. You know, by and large, the majority of our leased residential development is done. So that source of revenue is no longer there. So then the question we have to ask ourselves, if this is the level of services we as a community want, then how are we going to generate that revenue? What do we have at our disposal? And there was a lot of discussion, sell off city assets. I don't support that because that's a one-time shot. First, the assets we have that reasonably could be sold are not likely to generate sufficient revenue to make this year's payment, much less sustain that in the out years. So what do you do next year? We'll come back and revisit this again. We just don't have the assets to sell. The business taxes, and there is an ongoing discussion about the business and occupation tax. And there was a time when I favored that, but as we looked at it, one, it does not generate a huge source of revenue. And we are a small minority in the state of Washington of cities that have a B&O tax. What we have is undeveloped land, and we are competing for businesses now. In attending one of the meetings the mayor held, one of the business developers in the area talked about the 90 acres west of Intel. And what can we do here? We generate revenue with warehouses, partially because of the arsenic issue that we have, partially because of our advantageous location in proximity to I-5, and then where we're located, we're attractive for that kind of property. We're competing with Renton, when you say Renton, Auburn, and Fife for that kind of business, but they don't have a B&O tax. So the $25 million warehouse that we get built here generates $66,000 a year in property tax and a small percentage in B&O tax. But if we chase it away with B&O tax, then we don't have any revenues. So I didn't favor that. I would like to encourage business to come here, and they pay a property tax. Those businesses that call DuPont home, that actually, are headquartered here, they pay the same percentage that the rest of us do. In fact, some of their property is not exempt like some of our property is. I'm satisfied that that was a fair share equitable burden. The 97.5 cents, in my mind, was the absolute minimum. Now, Councilman Westman has said he supported a property tax, but not at that rate because of the onerous burden. Am I correct, Roger? Correct. Doing my thumbnail math, you talked about a 75 cent as acceptable. We passed 0.975. For the average home in DuPont that's assessed at $320,000, the difference is $6 a month between those figures. The 97.5 cents is an additional $26 a month. The 75 cents would have been $20 a month. So that's the difference. That $6 difference is the onerous burden. I don't consider that an onerous burden. What I consider an onerous burden is getting driven to the hospital or getting my house burnt down or whatever the results will be, or not having parks anymore. I view this levy, if we're successful, as a stake in the ground. It's a stake in the ground that prevents any further erosion of our current services and capacity and stabilizes the city's financial position. We're not where we should be yet. I'd like to see us with ambulance service. I think we need more people in some of our city staff departments, but this isn't the time. The economic condition doesn't support that. But I think if we can stabilize the situation now, if we can posture ourselves to encourage businesses to come, then our ability to generate revenues and service the citizens of this city the way we'd like to, whether it's emergency services, whether it's another planner so we can actually turn a building permit in faster than 6 weeks. Those are all things I think we ought to be doing. But, this is the fire we have to put out. This is the emergency. And I weighed all those things and thought that was the best course of action to follow. Thank you.
You have to pardon my voice here. I have a habit, once again, of having allergies. First of all, I'd like to welcome you people also. This is a great example of representative government, whether you agree or disagree. And this is fantastic. And on Constitutional Day, he makes it even greater. A couple things here real quickly. I'm not going to reiterate exactly what they said, because to reiterate once again is to bore some of you. But I do concur with the majority of what has been said so far. A couple things here real quickly. My wife and I retired to this community in 2002. Been here for about 10 years. We love this community. We've seen it grow. We grow to a point right now where we do have a very stable situation right now. We have, for the first time ever, a stable fire department, a stable police department. And to make up the debt for the city hall and the fire and the police, to pay less than $1 a day in a year's time. Hey, I'm on a fixed income. It doesn't bother me. I'm willing to pay that to keep the city going like it is. The other thing, once again, as far as the budget over the last 5-6 years, I think this council has done an excellent job in maintaining its budget. We've had to go back and make some very, very serious cuts. We've had to go back and do some real soul searching. And little by little, we cut this, we cut that, to the point where we are right now. People don't like to hear me say, once again, yeah, but along came the recession, and you knew about it. No, we didn't know about it. The recession came along. We knew there'd be some shortcomings in the future. The recession came along, and anybody that says that we knew about the recession, how bad it was going to be, must have had a sixth sense, because we sure didn't. A couple other things real quickly. It was mentioned here by one particular person that we have not looked at alternatives. That is not true. We have and are still looking for alternatives. We look at alternatives outside the city, within the city, and we continue to look for alternatives once again to make the budget. So to say once again that we just agreed upon the property tax and that was it, no, that's not true. So once again, I do concur with what they said. I'm not going to go on and on once again, so I'll turn the mic over to Ms. Trotter. Thank you.
I've been in town almost 10 years now. I don't remember the original levy lid lift that John talked about where we came up to $1.32. That was right before I got here. However, since then, we've tried to have 3 other levies of different sorts. The Parks one was not actually a Parks levy. It was the creation of a Metro Parks District, which then would have the right to levy up to 75 cents per thousand. Essentially it was. And that one didn't pass, and neither of the fire levies passed. Now, so we have been looking at the revenue shortfall. The Metro Parks District one was in 2007. It was before I got on the council. And it was because we realized that with all of the parks coming on board, with all of the additional costs of running the city wasn't going to have enough money to maintain the parks and the greenways in the fashion in which we were accustomed. So we were trying to find money for that. So we knew there were going to be revenue shortfalls even before the economy tanked. And we were looking for ways to try and meet those. Now, you may think that going ahead and building a new civic center is, not a good thing to do. However, as John mentioned, it was in the comp plan. As the city was growing further and further away from the historic village, I liked being able to walk to the city council meetings from my home in the historic village. However, the people in the larger part of the town wanted the civic center and the police department and the fire department closer to where they lived. They wanted to feel like it was part of all of DuPont, not just the historic village. And it was part of the comp plan, which has been in place since 1995 and 2001, updated every 6 years or so. So it was in the plans. It was to centralize the city services in a more, for the entire town, not just segregated into the historic village. And it was to be concurrent, because we realized that we're going to build out eventually to a town of about 12,000 people. I was not part of planning the Civic Center. I was on the planning agency at the time. I knew the meetings were going on because they were public. And we'd hear about them, but I had my own meetings to run with the planning agency, and I didn't want to go to yet another meeting. We occasionally, would get pieces thrown at us and say, what do you think of this? And we'd say, go council, go. Because we were meeting in the old City Hall building, and it was miserable. There was no air conditioning. It was miserable in the hot weather. There was there's probably heat, but it was cold in the offices. Our staff was crammed in there because at that time we had a community development director, we had 3 or 4 planners, we had a couple of extra secretarial type people, and there was not room in that building for it. We had 2 inspectors, we had whatever April was, a planning person. They were overflowing at the seams. Now people look at this building and say, but look at all the empty space you have. You're right, we have a lot of empty space because in order to save money, we cut out those positions, and the people that were that had those positions when we were in the crowded building aren't here anymore. Would it be more efficient for the city if we had them back? Yes, we'd probably get our building permits processed a little bit faster. We might have somebody in economic development who could go out and tell businesses that are looking for a place to build how wonderful it is in DuPont, and maybe we'd get some more business here. But we don't have anybody to do that, and so we're not spending the money on it, because we want to keep your parks green, and we want to keep your police circulating on the streets, and we want to keep the fire department responding. I voted to ask you people to approve the levy because I want to keep the city beautiful. I want to keep the services where they're at, because I know what it was like before we built this building, and I know that the police department was crowded. They didn't have any place to keep prisoners if they apprehended somebody. The fire department was miserable. They were spread all over town. They didn't have any place to keep their apparatus nice and clean and out of the rain. The Public Works Department had to share their equipment bays with the fire department. The city, it's a great city that we live in. The city council before me did a good job in sizing the facilities so that we will not be asking to build and tear this down and rebuild the Civic Center in another 10 years. It will last for a long time. We haven't been wasteful with your money. We realized that we need to cut when the economy crashed, and we started cutting. We stopped filling positions. We left things open. We've been trying really hard to keep your parks open, to keep your greenways clean and beautiful, to keep you safe with the public safety. And, we just, because the economy has not responded and it didn't come back as we hoped it would as quickly as possible, now we've reached the end of what we feel we can cut and still keep the city beautiful and safe. And that is why the council voted to ask for a levy.
How about now? If I hold it closer, does that work? Okay. So with that, have cards been passed out so we know what questions have folks want to answer? Because I really want to turn this over to the citizens and let them ask questions, ask comments, and get further clarification to things. And the other thing that I want to note is there were a lot of questions during the Finance Committee that I convened, and as council members have said, they put a lot of time and energy into that. And again, I want to say thank you to them for their thoughtful deliberation and consideration of options of how to help move us forward. And some of those questions were legal, some of those questions were technical. And so if you have those type of questions tonight, feel free to ask them. And to the best of our ability, either myself, the council, staff, or our legal counsel will provide that information. And if for some reason there isn't a question that we can't answer tonight, we'll make sure we take your name and we'll follow up with you, because letting you have the questions, the answers to the questions that you're seeking is important. So Dawn, do we have any questions from the audience?
No, not yet. We'll go down the tally sheet, kind of sign-in sheet. Alan Cromwell?
Crowell. Crowell.
Crowell? Crowell. Do you want to make a comment? That's okay. I can come over there.
We're going to give you the microphone so that way we get it on tape and everyone can hear.
I didn't know that I was going to have this opportunity. See? My name's Alan Kroll. Some of you may have read a letter that I wrote that was published in the South Puget Sound News. I think that's the name of it. Frankly, I would like to see us, the thrust of that is, a lot of folks have talked about how the Civic Center was built and all the issues associated with that. And I always get the idea that those that don't like this think that the people who were involved did something wrong, that there were shenanigans somehow. I took a lot of time out of my busy work schedule to look into that situation, and I think that's absolutely not true. Nobody feathered their nest. Nobody did anything illegal, immoral, unhealthy, or fattening. In fact, I believe that they did a really good job. Folks are concerned about, why did you use certificates of participation instead of a bond voted on by the public? That's probably a fair question. But the council from the very beginning intended to use either certificates of participation or non-voted bonds. There was never a question about as I examined the record, there was never a question about how it was going to be paid for. So selecting certificates of participation was, of the two, was the smart thing to do. If you have ever been in real estate or had a house built, it's the difference between you getting a construction loan to build the house or your builder getting the construction loan. In one case, you assume the risk for that house being built. In the other case, the builder does. So the city saved us a fair amount of money. They deferred all the costs until it was a turnkey operation. Frankly, I would like to see this entire debate move away from that and into what happens next, because that's where we are. The question is, we're here, this is what we have, so now what do we do about it? If Proposition 1 fails, among the things that we do about it is we lose at least 3 firemen. Somebody said, you know, I don't want more firemen, I want ALS. Really? So therefore I'm voting no. That was the. If you vote no, you don't get advanced life support. You just get 3 fewer firemen. You may get, I don't know what the other cuts are because the city council hasn't put the budget together yet. But they will start cutting, I assume, in a reverse priority from the way that they budget things. First they budget for fire and police, and then they budget for things that are, you know, habitatability. I wonder who thought that up. But things that make the place habitable, and lastly for parks and recreations. So if I was the king and I had to cut, I would start with parks and recreations. You can't cut it all, but you could cut a fair amount of it, and then I would go to the second priority and I'd cut that, and the last thing I would cut would be fire and safety. If you look at it, you can't cut enough to make all the cuts required until you get up to fire and safety. I believe that that is correct. Okay? So, if the difference between, you know, acceptable and unacceptable is $6 a month, or you, okay, I'm willing to pay the additional $6 a month. You know, it seems to me, it makes sense to me that we ought to do this. And those who know me know that how tight I am. I'm a real physical conservative. I have a couple of nickels to rub together because I never wasted them. You know. So, but this is something I'm pretty serious about. What I think we need to do this, and there have not been this. I would like to put this all. There were no shenanigans in getting this place built. That just didn't happen, and I defy anyone to show me that that did happen. It's been audited. There are no findings. Okay, so now we need to move on.
Thank you.
I'm done.
Hi. Never done this before, but I felt some concern, so I wanted to come as a citizen. I'm not concerned, I guess, about all the complex things that you folks talk about, and I appreciate what you do for our city, and I agree with everyone that everyone can find $6 a month, and that isn't my concern. My concern is, where is my $6 going? Because I moved to DuPont 8 years ago, and I'm on my second home, so obviously I like it here. My husband and I chose to come here. My daughter's going to be moving here. I mean, we're going to put second and third generation here. We love DuPont, as everyone does here. But I've seen a decline in what DuPont looks like to me compared to, as you put it, the Mayberry that I drove into. And my little community, my little area where I live, And maybe this is this ignorance because I don't know all your politics and how our money goes, and it's because I just like to live here. I don't like to get into the complex part of the city. Is I know everyone in this city pays $32.22 a month for dues, okay, except for old DuPont. But those of us that live in Northwest Landing, and then I live in another community where I pay more dues, which I chose to, so that's fine. So I guess my question is, what do our dues pay for as compared to our taxes? You're asking us to do a tax increase. And I think that that's probably a fair question because most of us are just sitting on our street drinking our coffee and, you know, we don't know what taxes pay for and what dues pay for. We just see the weeds growing in our parks and the stuff looking a little crappier than it did a year ago and 2 years ago and 3 years ago. In my community, we had a nice retired lady that's been hounding some poor soul here in City Hall, I don't know who it is, asking, you know, about how to get our little park cleaned up. And so we, as a community, are volunteering, and we're doing it ourselves. And y'all just dropped off some mulch for us, and a wheelbarrow, and a hose. And we're doing it ourselves, and we're taking pride in it. And I don't mind volunteering. I am like the volunteer or us. But I guess if you could just answer my question as just a lay person in your community, and I'm sure that there's about 7,800 of us out there that have the same question because we don't know the complexities. What do our dues go for, and what do our taxes go for? Can you answer that? Is there a difference, like what park gets cleaned by dues and what doesn't? And
Actually, Aaron, who's the next name of the person that's going to speak? Okay, I thought you called Larry Ackerman's name. So ma'am, I'll answer your question as simply as I can. Because I used to live in Savannah Oaks, and I was in the situation where I had to pay a homeowner's due to my condominium association, and then I had to pay to the ROA, which is the Residential Owners Association, and then on top of that, I had to pay the city for taxes. Those are all three completely separate entities. And when I was living in Savannah Oaks, what that paid for was the insurance and the maintenance of those buildings and those facilities and the parks that I enjoyed in those little areas. The ROA, they have ownership of several assets within this city that we pay for essentially to keep it Mayberry, to keep it Pleasantville, to make sure that there are certain standards across the city in Savannah Oaks and beyond our great community. Then you have our city and those fees and those taxes that you pay. And the reality is, you know, and anyone correct me if I'm wrong, I actually believe that you pay more to the ROA or to these homeowners associations than you do to the city in taxes. But we're part of a shared community. It's how we've grown up or grown into Northwest Landing and that development that's occurred here. And there are ROA meetings, there are homeowners meetings that you can go and attend to get the answers to those questions. I would not want to answer for them, but I think it's important to distinguish that in situations like yours and situations like mine, there are different fee structures that are paying for different services that are provided by different entities that collectively help make our community what we love and why we live here. And so if there's any questions, I'd really refer you to ROA and to Larry Ackerman and those board members that could give you more details if that would be helpful. And I'd be glad to connect you with them. Yes.
Because he was saying that if we had 1, 2, 3, that parks would be his last priority, but that might not be the last priority of the rest of the citizens. That's what I'm saying. So is that what pays to keep our parks up? Is that why they're not being kept up right now? Because we have a shortfall? Because that's what we're told when we call, is that we can't afford. And that's what we were told, that we can't afford it.
There's several reasons for that, many of which the council spoke to. And as the mayor that inherited this challenge, I'll tell you, it's tough being the mayor of this city because There's not a lot of resources, but I'm playing stud poker. This is not draw poker. I'm playing the hand that I'm dealt in many cases. And we don't have the resources or the revenue to go hire back some of those public services employees that we had that take care of some of the things that you enjoy, the parks and the recreation. What the decisions will look like going forward of what to cut, those will be made first by me in a recommendation to the council, and then the council, as your representative government, will make that decision of how they want to prioritize. So I'm not going to share that with you at this point. You've heard from Mr. Crowell what his priority orders are, but the bottom line is we are short-staffed, we are short revenue, and we're starting to see the effects of that. And if I am in a situation where I have to propose cuts, I will do so in a priority order. And I wish it was simple as just saying I could close a park or 2 parks and everything would be fine. But as was illustrated earlier, cuts will go across the gamut, across every department and every aspect of operations, from public safety to parks and recreation to public works, at least in my initial review, because I don't see any other way forward to pay for the things that we have to pay for. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Copperthwaite from 1485 Thompson Circle. I face the clock tower, my wife and I do. We've been there since 1996. In fact, at the time when we moved in, the clock tower park was not finished yet, if I remember correctly, Linda. The streets weren't all, sidewalks and everything weren't in. So we've seen a lot of change, like everyone else has, over the last 10 or 15 years. And I guess I'm sort of tired of listening to everybody nickel and diming us for our tax base when we're so low. I just asked Susan before I stood up. In Federal Way, over 17 years ago, we were paying $2,100 a year for, a small house, okay? The condo we moved out of, we were paying over $200 a month in condominium association fees, and I think it was only 48 condos. So, when you look at the total cost of everything here, we're really we're tight. We're tight. And, when you see things like the parks, you got to realize Weyerhaeuser was taking care of the parks, then they dropped them off into, to the lap of the city. Or the ROA was sort of forced into part of that plan, you say. And, of course, you just can't keep playing that game forever. And as much as we don't, at our age, want to keep paying more money, we know that we're way below what we need to be paying to take care of all that we have. We look at police and fire in particular. We have a lot of older people living here. Guess what? They need to be watched over and taken care of, because we don't have a lot of neighbors sitting around taking care of them, you say. That's a reality. That's why there isn't any volunteer fire department, because it couldn't serve the needs of our community. And we love it the way it is, and sure, some things have been nicer, but we wouldn't have stuck around for 16 and a half years if we didn't like what we saw here. So, I'm with the council on this. We need to move forward. That's our thought.
Thank you. You said his question was answered already.
If I knew I was going to be on tape, I'd have dressed up a little bit more for this, so I apologize for that. For those who don't know me, my name is Steve Young, 1536 Richmond Avenue, and I've lived in DuPont since October of 2000. I was elected on the council 2002, 2003, mayor from 2004 to 2007. Over the last 2 years, I've been approached numerous times by my citizens here, our citizens, about what the hell happened in this building. And I'm here to lay out the truth once and for all, because I'm tired of listening to it. I want to put this to bed. When I inherited this ship in 2004, and being a Navy guy, when you relieve as the commanding officer of the ship, you have ultimate responsibilities. No matter what happened the day before, no matter what your commanding officer was like the day before, it doesn't matter. You own it when you say, I relieve you, sir. First thing I did was interview folks from the community. I talked to folks that were in our then quadrant, and their biggest complaint was, why can you not get me a building permit in a short amount of time? So when I went to the city hall that we had at the time and into the spaces, and I found piles of stuff stacked on things, they couldn't find anything in there. There's just pile after pile after pile. And it wasn't due to lack of effort, it was due to lack of space. As was mentioned by Councilmember Aaron Wright, you know, when you looked at the fire department, you looked at the police department, we were under a serious crisis. When I came on the council in 2002, we were the fastest growing community in the state. And through that time, through the end of even the end of my term in 2007, we continued to be the fastest growing community in the state, to the tune of 20 to 25% per capita growth each and every year. So something had to happen. We could no longer exist in the buildings we were in. We had to make some adjustments to do what was right for the community. And as a result of that, I sought the concurrence of council in 2004 to begin a feasibility study. It cost us some money, $50,000, $60,000, I can't remember what it was, to start thinking, what would this facility and our public safety building have to look like that would support the needs of a city of 12,500 people going forward into the future. So over the course of a year and a half time, okay, between 2004 into 2005, there were a number of charrettes that were held around the community where citizens were invited to participate. I think we had 2 council members that participated as well. And we got the inputs. I also directed the consultant at that time to say, hey, go look and see what other communities are doing. We don't want to be the smartest guys in the book. Go look at comparable sized communities, go look at comparable funded communities, and figure out what those guys are doing. Because I don't want to reinvent the wheel here, right? There's no sense in that. So about mid-2005-ish, there was a plan. We went through it, we looked at the floor plan, we looked at what was laid out. Next, we proceeded to the financing stage. So roughly in 2005, once again, with the concurrence of council, remember, the chief executive of this city is nothing more but the person that implements the policy as set forth by council. So with concurrence of council, I led a contract to a financial consultant to help us develop the plan. What, if any, options do we have as a city should we decide to embark on building the Civic Center Public Safety Complex, which, by the way, as was mentioned, is required by the comp plan. We were already in violation of the comp plan when I took office. Okay, so that's the first thing you had to face with a comp plan that had not been updated in over 10 years, which is required every 5 years, okay, and on an ongoing basis. The consultant went out, came back, and said, hey, here are our going-in assumptions. We think that they're very conservative based on what's happening in the market today. This is 2005. Okay? They projected growth upwards of 6% annually for well into the future. It ain't gonna stop. In my civilian job at the time, I had the opportunity to be working with fund managers that manage $8 billion of state trust fund monies. On the side, I approached those fund managers, as well as our independent consultants that we had from Boston, and said, hey, so this is what these guys are telling me, is 6% sustainable. And people who get paid a lot more money than I do said, 6%, that's it? Because we're projecting much more than that. I came back and I told our financial consultants to say, hey, look, cut it to 1.5%. And they go, what the hell are you doing? We're projecting, I said, cut it to 1.5%. I want to base our assumptions on that and our growth rate going forward. Why is that? Because I wanted to ensure that the legacy I left behind was one that was sustainable, right? And you can look at it now in 2012 and say, well, yeah, but didn't you see 2008 coming? I didn't realize I was going to get mobilized active duty in 2008 either, but I went, okay? The answer was in 2005, when this finally came out, and the report came out in mid-2006, we were well within the city's bonding capability to go forward with the revenues that were projected, with a very low growth rate, to be able to sustain the payments of this complex, as well as our public safety complex, and provide the adequate facilities for our staff which work every day to support all of us and what we do. That was easy. It was an easy sell to do because it was conservative estimates and the revenues would support it. Okay? So we took it, we sent it to council for a vote, we came up for a vote, we moved forward. All right, so in 2006, basically I think the actual groundbreaking was, I think, December of 2006, when we turned the first shovel full of dirt out here. We embarked and proceeded forward with building this facility. We knew when we built this facility there would be a slight amount available for growth, because we knew at the time we'd level out somewhere about 8,000 to 9,000 people, and then we'd go to phase 2, roughly 10 years down the road, and we'd get to our proverbial 12,500, 15,000 people. So that's what this building is sized for. This building and the public safety building were sized to meet the demands of this city for 50 years without the need to come back and say, hey, we hosed this up. We need to add another 10,000 square feet on this thing. We didn't do that, right? Like we all know when building a house, cheaper to build it and put it in up front than it is to come back and do it later. Okay? And that's the way we did it, and that's how it was done. So that's a brief little history lesson on what happened to get this building to where it is today. Are there vacancies here? Absolutely. And I can tell you, having gone through this, in this city, either a member of council for 2 years or as mayor for 4 years, I'm not going to here to tell you what you should vote or how you should vote. That's your own personal decision on what you believe the facts to be. But I can tell you, if you're unhappy with services, there's a reason for that. If you're unhappy with the way things look, there's a reason for that. Okay? If you're not involved with your city council and you're not involved in looking at the numbers and where they sit, then you ought to be. Because anything else, is basically just hearsay. Okay? Over the last 2 years, as I mentioned, folks have been coming to me and saying, hey, can you give me the history? Can you give me the history? Can you give me the history? I chose tonight to come to give the history. That's what's happened, and that's how we ended up with this facility as it is today. There was not a ramrod through. It was a very careful and deliberate process that we went through. And if Shelley were here, our former city attorney, she will tell you that if anybody in this world is more risk adverse than me, she had a hard time finding that individual, because I'm extremely risk adverse and wanted to make sure that every contract was in fact locked down solid as we got moving forward. When you look at the construction costs for this facility, when we first broke ground, when we said, we need you to pour asphalt, they said, what day do you want us to pour? Because if you want it next week, this is what the price is going to be. If you want it this week, it might be a little lower. With what was happening in 2006 and 2007, 2008. Building was going on like crazy, which means prices were changing daily for petroleum products because they're pouring asphalt everywhere. When we went to do the drop shipment here for the lumber required for this place, when we first, same thing, okay, the contractor said, give me the lumber. When do you want it? Because that'll depend on what the price is going to be. So fortuitously or not, when they finally started pouring the asphalt to create this parking lot and everything else and start drop shipping the lumber, the housing market turned. Okay, so now we're starting to talk in 2008. It started to turn. As a result, this building was built under cost. The original bond values that we had set up before was built under cost because everything with the estimates that were done came in below that because of what happened in the community, what happened in the rest of the world. And for those of you that think that this is a city of DuPont issue, this revenue versus expense issue, look at Pierce County government, look at Washington state government, look at the federal government. This is not unique to the city of DuPont. This is everywhere in this country. The state of Washington laid off over 11% of its workforce in the last 4 years. 11% of its workforce has been laid off, gone as a result of the recession. Okay? The greatest recession that we've had in this community, in this country, since the Great Depression. I'm convinced we don't call it a depression because we don't want to freak everybody out. Okay? But the fact of the matter is it's time to put this issue to bed tonight. Okay? The decisions have been made. Council has voted. It's up to you now whether you want to support it or not. I get there'll be differing opinions on whether this is good, bad, indifferent. That's fine. Everybody understands that. Okay? And everybody's entitled to their opinion to vote the way they want to. That's why it's a secret ballot. But the idea of, was there anything going on? Why do we get these bad contracts and all that other stuff here? I'm here to tell you, I was here, I lived it, I breathed it for 4 years putting this thing together. And I can tell you right now, I was absolutely risk adverse, and Shelley will back me up on this, I know she will. in that we made sure that we got the best deal that we could at the time for the city. Okay? So, like I said, I'm not going to advocate one way or another for this thing. All of you got to decide that. But I just wanted to share a little bit of that history lesson so I get people stop asking me, what did we do during this time frame in 2004 to 2007 on, when we built this thing, and I hear all about these sleight of hand things that happen. And I'm here to tell you, if anybody wants whatever I know, I'm happy to share that. But as far as I'm concerned, it's done, and it's done now. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next comment is anonymous comment, just want it read into the record. Thank you, council members and mayor, for looking out for the citizens of the city. You are doing what we voted you in office for. Next person is Bill McDonald.
Well, I'm not going to be able to get to the intensity of Steve, but I was here during the same period of time, and the fact of the matter is, this facility, this civic center, had to be built. There's no question about it. It was the right decision. I'm going to vote for the levy. It will cost me all of $160 a year, I think, extra, and it is more than worth it. For me, it isn't really a question of this civic center. It is a question of the character of this community. DuPont, I think, is at a crossroads. It can decide that it's going to slip into a second-rate status as a community, or it can have the guts to say that we care and we can do it, and we're going to support this community. We're going to support an excellent city council. I know every one of these people. They should get medals for what they have to put up with, and for the long hours that they put into their positions. They're smart. They make good decisions, and this was a good decision. Dawn was involved in the nuts and bolts of this. She is excellent city administrator and a brilliant finance director, and she was instrumental in getting this thing built. And this community needs to get behind the council, the mayor, and say that we're going to support our community. We're going to move forward. We're going to get through this recession. And for $160 a year, $200 a year, $300 a year, come on. It matters that we have a quality community. And I'm going to implore anyone that I know to vote for this, and I'm going to be there, and I'm going to talk to everybody I can and get the vote out for this measure because it's important. Thank you.
Sharon Gorski.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, I don't get it. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll use them. Sharon Gorski, 1875 Ridgeview Drive. I've heard from a few council people, from prior mayor who just left, that the process for developing this building was transparent. Public meetings, open to the public. You should have come to the meetings. And that's fine. I mean, I was doing what everybody else is doing. I was raising a child and working. My question is, the meetings were public. The process was transparent. There were no shenanigans. I understand that completely. Why did the citizens of DuPont not get a final say of whether or not this building should have been built? There was no vote. That is my question. If anybody could answer that, please. Thank you.
So I'm not going to respond to that because I wasn't here, I wasn't on council, and I wasn't the mayor. But I've asked that question several times. What are the different options? And Deanna, God bless her heart, our bond counsel, actually walked me through the 9 or so different options that are available. And Deanna, if you could address that question in as minimal of legalese as you possibly could, that would be fantastic.
I don't know if I can do that, but I'll try. Deanna Gregory, Pacifica Law Group. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks for having me here tonight. I think there's probably two parts of an answer to that question. One, there's the legal side, and then there's also the business decision, comp plan, what the city was doing at the time side. From a legal perspective, the city had sufficient non-voted debt capacity to enter into the lease arrangement. The full principal amount of the lease, of course, counts against the city's debt capacity. The city had sufficient debt capacity at the time, so it was not legally required to seek voter approval prior to entering into the arrangement.
You said there was another part of it?
I said on the other side, it sounds like from what we've heard tonight is that it was a necessity that had a lot of background and prior discussions around the necessity of the facility. I wasn't privy to those conversations, so I can't speak to the business decision side of it, but on the legal side, it was not necessary.
Thank you. Would any council members like to speak to that?
Sure. I guess the question of whether the citizens should have had an opportunity, I guess I find that question often to be kind of perplexing because the citizens, the city is a creature of the state, and in particularly a code city, and the state delegates certain authorities and requirements to a city, and one of those is the ability to enter into non-voted debt, and that ability is exercised by the council in what they call councilmanic debt. Why did we choose to do that rather than go to a vote? So what we did was use the COPs, certificates of participation, which are very similar to a limited tax general obligation bond that's non-voted. In fact, the differences between the two are very minor. They're almost the same. But the question about why we chose to use non-voted debt as opposed to some sort of form of voted debt, such as bonds or COPs, was for four particular reasons. The first was there was a clear and urgent need to build the Civic Center at the time. This was not a question. You've heard a lot of people talk about tonight about how it was not a question at all that it needed to be built at the time it was built. But it was not. But at the same time, it was not unanticipated. The need to build this Civic Center was identified decades earlier, and it appeared for the first time in the 1995 comp plan, which means that people had understood long ago that there was going to be a need to build this. And so plans were slowly starting to be developed. And Steve Young walked you through the last few years of the whole plan. We went out, we got needs assessments done, we did open houses so that people could come in and take a look. We got architects who gave us 1/3 drawings and also gave us cost estimates of what it was going to cost to build this building. It came back too expensive for us, and so we went through a value engineering process. Here was a big surprise to all of us when we asked the fire chief and the police chief, what it is they needed in the building. Big surprise at the time. It was different fire chief and police chief. They realized that was the time to ask for something, and what came back was a lot larger than what we had originally planned for. So we squeezed it down. We eliminated a training tower for the police, for the fire department, a shooting range for the underground shooting range for the police department. We cut back on the costs of this building quite a bit. We shrunk some things down. People have talked about the wood that's in here, about how expensive. That's inexpensive softwood. That is not hardwood. That is not mahogany, as somebody says it is. It's kind of actually a nice tribute, the fact that something that inexpensive could be made to look that good. But this building is quite a bit cheaper than it started out to be. So we had a clear and urgent need. We had a long and carefully, publicly vetted process that we went through to develop a plan to address that need. We had the means to address that need. We went out and had a subject matter experts do projections of cash flows and revenues and expenses for the city going out into the future, and showed that that we had the money to pay for it. And finally, we have the legal authority to do it. You elected us to implement the authorities that were granted us by the state. No one told us that, hey, I want to vote for you, but we're not, as long as you don't vote for the Civic Center without a voted debt. That was never an issue. To say that there wasn't a public process is kind of a twist on the fact of what actually happened. There was a very public process starting, I'm sure, before the 1995 comp plan, in which that was voted. There was an opportunity, there was a public hearing on that. That's the process we use for adopting comp plans. So we have public hearings in front of the planning agency. And then there was a 1997 capital facilities plan, also well vetted, discussed, anticipated that it was going to have to, that this civic center was going to have to be built. 2001 comp plan, again, public hearings, public inputs. Then 2004 capital facilities plan, I had the opportunity to work on that. Again, lots of public input. Everybody knew this thing was coming. And meanwhile, all this time, you're electing new council members all along the way. You've had a lot of input, a lot of public input. At the time that we voted to do this, there was, I think, only one person who came to me and expressed concern that it was not going to be a public vote. And that was it. That was it. I mean, the fact of the matter is the public bought into this completely at the time. And we're hearing objections now, 5 years later. And so in my world, when I have a clear and urgent need for action, I've got a long-developed, vetted plan that was developed by experts in a public process. I have the means to execute that plan because I have the money. And third, I have the authority to execute that plan. That adds up to action. All right? And that's what we did. We took action. So that's why it didn't go to a vote of the people, because I'm really not sure what the question would have been.
There's no question.
Next is another question. Please explain why the city isn't raising specific B&O taxes like square foot, mineral extraction, and forestry.
Why the city is not raising specific taxes?
B&O.
Okay. The council can do that. The council can, tonight, call a public, this could have been a formal meeting, and they could have increased the B&O tax for any of the categories that we have. I think we have roughly 7 categories. And that can be done at any time by the council. Why that's not being done, you have to ask that to the council. And I know I thoughtfully considered this because it was one of the options that the Community Finance Committee recommended. They said, hey, we have a B&O tax right now that is equitable. It cuts right across the board. It's not equitable, that's not what I mean. It's even. It's cut right across the board. Everybody pays the same rate. And so one of the options that was proposed was just double it. We get about $200,000 now, and we would get $200,000 additional by doubling our B&O tax, as is. They also looked at doubling the license fee, which everybody pays the same rate across the board. When I considered the recommendation from the Community Finance Committee, I thoughtfully considered it because, to me, we're not going to tax our way out of this. We're not going to do anything other then build and grow our way out of this problem. We need revenue, and we need to stimulate the economy. And that's a long-term plan, a long-term strategy. As I said, we're playing stud poker. This is the hand that was dealt, and I have to play that. And I had to look for solutions from my perspective as the mayor in the short amount of time frame that I had responsibility for. And we brought folks together, we looked at the options, and when that option was presented, I thought that there may be other opportunities than just doubling our tax. As you heard earlier, and as I heard from the business community, we're limited because we have the B&O tax, which it impairs us. It's something that is not attractive for our community, for development communities to look at. And so to just double that, it didn't seem like the best approach. I wanted to examine that more. So we looked at reforming it. Now, there are several different reforms that we could make. I've had conversations with the business community. I've had conversations with the council. The council's going to take this up. They're going to look at these additional reforms, things that I looked at, things that the Community Finance Committee looked at. They could target a single industry like what was it, the forest gravel tax. That's one of the things that could be looked at. But as far as for where I'm going to spend my time and what my recommendation was looking at it was, we have limited time, limited energy, and limited resources. And there is an opportunity to reform our B&O tax code. And there's an opportunity to generate revenue from it, whether it be $200,000 or more. But it takes time. It's not something that can responsibly be done overnight. You've all heard earlier how we have limited staff and limited resources. And I think that actually reforming our B&O code is something that should be looked at in the future. There are some things that could make it more equitable. We could raise it for some business industries. We could lower it for others. It would be a great tool for us to examine in depth to stimulate the economy and maybe generate some revenue to cover some of the needs that we have in this community. But instead of just rushing out to recommend that we take action and turn it on and off like a light switch or double it or target a specific industry, as I was talking to the business community, I was talking to the different folks in this town, they said, we don't have a unified plan. There's not a unified economic development plan. We've got people that come together and they market our history and they market our tourism. They've got plans for those things. But shouldn't we be doing that all together? So if I've got limited time and limited energy and limited resources, and so does the staff, that seems like the first prudent step. Let's look at our historical assets. Let's look at the tourism assets that we have and the plans that are in place and the plans that are being developed. And then let's look at where we want to make investments. And once we know where we want to go, then let's adjust the revenue to fund those things. So I'm looking long-term, and I don't want to make a short-term decision that could be done overnight, not responsibly in my perspective, that would hinder the solution that is the long-term, in the long-term best interest for our community, which is growing and developing our way out and providing some financial stability while we look at other options. So that's why I'm not recommending it. The council is going to have several opportunities at workshops and work sessions, and I'd encourage you to look at those recommendations, look at what the purpose is and the revenue that would come in, and have those conversations with them. For me personally, all options need to be on the table to grow and strengthen our economy and develop our way out of this. But for the things that we need to generate revenue for, I want to be really clear what those priorities are and then look at making the right investments. And right now, we don't have that plan in place, but we will. And then I'll ask the council and the public to invest accordingly. So, council, does anyone want to address that question?
Yeah, just a couple of things real quickly. Small business and medium-sized business, that's the crux of all jobs. There's no question about that. Government doesn't create jobs. Small business and medium-sized businesses create jobs. And going along with what the mayor just said, we had a short period of time, and the code, our code, and I'll back him up on this, is not very equitable. And to go back there in a short period of time and throw out a code or a business tax would not be fair. For example, this young lady over here has a business, and to throw out that tax right at her and say it's equitable, no, it wouldn't be. So time, and we want to make sure, once again, we go back on that business code and B&O tax and make it equitable. And so, and maybe by next year, we can come up with some more taxes. So this goes back to what I said a while ago. We are continuously looking for alternatives.
And to touch on a couple of things the mayor said, revising the business taxes is not off the table. It's just not the solution for this problem. We will be looking at it as part of the budget process ongoing, and I believe it is on the table for tomorrow night's meeting as our budget workshop, so come back again for more fun and games tomorrow night. But one of the things that, and this is usually where John comes in and explains that one of the reasons that the mayor touched on is that we could have raised about $200,000 with doubling the B&O tax, and we could have raised approximately another $100,000 by doubling the licensing fees, which would give us an additional $300,000, and we'd still fall way short of what we needed to come up with. But the other issue with taxes like the B&O tax, not so much the licensing tax, but the B&O tax, is our B&O tax is based on the revenue of the businesses. So like the sales tax, in bad times, the revenue for the businesses goes down, so the tax that you are able to collect from the businesses goes down. We wanted a more stable tax base that we could count on for at least the 7 years that we're asking for the levy lift. We wanted something that we could count on for 7 years at least. If the economy, all of a sudden booms, yeah, B&O tax would have been a great opportunity, because then we would have gotten more than the $200,000 possibly if we get some more businesses in here. But if the economy, gets more sluggish, or say one of our larger businesses that has more revenue, one of our restaurants or something, goes under for some reason or decides to relocate, then there goes that source of B&O tax, and there goes our B&O tax revenue. So we wanted something that the houses are going to be here, the property is going to be here, the property tax is going to always be here, and that amount that we ask for is always going to be here. And the rate that it ends up being as a proportion of your property value may change, but the dollar is going to be a dollar, or the 97.5 cents is going to be 97.5 cents. We can count on that. Something like sales tax, when the economy crashed, our sales tax revenue went way down also, because people stopped spending money. And if they don't spend money, of people's pocketbooks.
Next question.
Karen Kardonsky.
Hold it. I'm kind of weird, but I'm close issue. Karen Kardonsky. I live on McNeil Street. We all love DuPont. We wouldn't be here if we didn't. Some of us have been here through deployments, job relocations. We keep coming back because we want to. Most of us not because we have to. It saddens me to see our city in this state. I'm over this building. If I hear one more person complain about this building in the community, I'm going to throw up. It's debt. It's debt. It is what it is. And I was on the finance committee, and I spent 11 weeks and countless hours with an amazing group of people listening to crazy information. I would consider myself an active citizen. Some of you probably consider me annoying. But whatever you want to call me, I think I'm pretty much super informed. I share the information that we get at these meetings with all my other park moms. Some of us are horrified, some of us are stunned, and some of them don't care. So my big concern is, as a owner currently in DuPont, is that terrible history of passing levies. So in November, if it doesn't pass, I recall sitting and making that priority list with the finance committee, and it was ugly. And I remember what the citizens said at the committee meeting, and I remember how they reacted when I read the dreaded list at the end of the meeting saying, if we don't find this money, this is what's going to happen. And the looks on and the comments, people would move. And DuPont is a committee, and is a community, and we talk about it. We own homes here. People own homes here. But they don't have to. They don't have to. And, you know, I say it with a sad sigh in my heart. We recently sold our house. We've been here for 10 years. I am sad to be. I'm not the only one that feels this way. I know I'm speaking for many. We don't want to see it come to a laughable, what we joked about in the Finance Committee as a Tillicum. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see that. But we've seen the shape of some of our parks, some of our greenways, and we just don't want that. And so my huge concern is we've put this all of our eggs in one basket, and we've told her, we're going to tell our citizen, vote for this one solution. This is the one solution we're throwing at them right now. And they're going to hear us talk about reform, and they're going to hear us talk about these other ideas that we're working on. But they're not going to listen to that. All they're going to hear is, this is what is going to fix us. And if it doesn't pass, then what? And I know what the then whats are, and I'm horrified. And I will pay it, absolutely, because I love my community. But I'm worried about the people that are not voting. Then what? I really think we're going to have to really get out there and figure it out. I mean, I don't want to. That's it.
Thank you.
Ray Kahn.
Good evening. Ray Kahn, 1852 Johnson Avenue, real estate agent. Two things. I think one of the problems, first of all, I like what you've got here. It's not utilized. It's built for 12,500 people, and there's only 8,000 or something, so we need to use this building, and I've got ideas for that. But anyway, I think the important thing with DuPont is it hasn't got quality businesses. It's got businesses that's taking cash and not checks and credit cards. And that's a problem. There's too many of them. And I've been around. I know them. So it needs more businesses that are where you're paying that kind of money so the sales tax can be paid. So it's got the wrong type of businesses. Yeah. My second point is that I think that, I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn, but I think we should get some promises. If we're going to pay this $300 a month, my wife and I will pay it, but we want some promises that we can use this building. You know, it's a lovely building. It'd be great for meetings. Like I went last Friday to the genealogy at Olympia, and we used the Thurston County Courthouse, which was almost identical to this, and 65 people came there. You know, that was a poor night. So and they all pay money. So, and they get the use of the facilities, and they talk about the building, they talk about everything, they meet new people. So there's things happening all the time. There's traffic flowing where nothing is happening at the moment, or I can't see anything happening. So I'm just saying that maybe we can get some promises that we can use the building for more than it's being used now. And my suggestion last week to the mayor was that Squeeze up some of the people that have got a big office and they're only doing a couple of hours a week, and let somebody else rent that place. Give you some revenue. That's it.
Dave Bungert.
Good evening. I live at 2702. Oh, sorry. Really quick.
This is public service at its finest.
Yeah,
folks.
thanks. The first thing is, if you're in a contract, read your contract to get out of it. We all have phone contracts. We all know how to get out of them. The big issue that I have is I was at some of the meetings when this was being debated. It was debated. It was discussed. There was concerns that why aren't they developing the other acreage to pay for the Civic Center? Okay, I don't care. I don't care that they built it. I don't care where it's going. What I care about is they keep saying it's the economy. Ladies and gentlemen, First Park Northwest Landing Development Agreement. This was in September 22nd, 2009. Very quickly, I don't want to read the whole thing, but it is provide background information on the proposed agreement stating that the land use decisions are attached outlining requirements for First Industrial Realty Trust. Developer has stated that the development will proceed in phases and final plats will take longer than 5 years to complete. Therefore, they are requesting the city to enter a development agreement for a period of 10 years. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you that were in the finance committee, those that you came to the meetings, they talked about, we had a plan, we had transition funds. Ladies and gentlemen, they gave it away. They blame it on the economy. They gave away our transition funds. Now, all of them said we didn't have a crystal ball. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is David Bungert. Here we go. In that same page, public comments. David Bungert, 2702 MacArthur. Encourage council not to look at developers' costs and instead look at the cost for DuPont if we don't get anything for 10 years. Thank you. Second, Councilmember Jordan has said we have to move forward. I wholeheartedly agree. So we must face the debt now, not wait 2 more presidential terms. Here's a suggestion. For the police, we all want public safety. Hire a commissioned police chief. Okay? Mr. Goodpasture, great guy. In 2009, I asked him to do that. He's paid to do nothing. That's the reason we don't have an officer covering another officer. Second, for the fire department, in 2014, we can have ALS, we can merge with another fire district or create our own. All we have to do is get our state reps to amend the RCW for the fire boundary law. Ladies and gentlemen, we pay $1.7 million for our fire department. Our debt is $1.7 million. Get the fire department out of our general fund. I will pay for ALS. I will pay for Medic One. Ladies and gentlemen, May 24th, at the other town hall meeting, I got up and left early. I passed Mike Gorski, and he looked at me and he said, man, get mad, get mad. And I'm just not going to get mad. I'm actually pissed, but it's just so far gone. Ladies and gentlemen, I had to transport my son to Mary Bridge. My phone went off. We in this community are self-rescuing, okay? We need to face the facts. We need to face the debt now. Second, how about this? How about this? To the businesses, take on that $250,000, $200,000 in the B&O. Do the extraction tax. And how about this? As a homeowner, how about we do a 2-year levy, pay for a 2-year levy to fund staff support building services division. For 2 years, depending on, I don't know when the deal for First Trust goes through, but put out, hey, for 2 years, any developer that comes here, the city will charge no fees. The homeowners, the property owners will pay your developmental costs if you build in DuPont and you break ground and you start construction before 2017. And the reason I say 2017, we could have this from 2014, fund it for 2 years. Everyone has said, we need people here. We need people here to develop. But no one has presented a plan how to get a developer into DuPont. Here you go. As a homeowner, I will gladly pay to have ALS, to have a fire department. I stand united with it, you citizens and the businesses. Police service, I stand united with you. Ladies and gentlemen, I told them it wasn't the economy. I asked them, what is the opportunity cost? Face the debt now and fix the problem. Excuse me, we will not fix the problem. We have to manage the situation we are in. And no one on either side, and I've gone to some of the parties on both sides, no one is addressing the debt. That is the issue. I don't care what happened here, how we go forward. Ladies and gentlemen, we can default on this building. We can keep the public safety building. We can also aggressively and hostily negotiate and say, look, we're either going to file Chapter 7, right? 9 for a city. And say, or we can go and say, hey, we've got a plan. We need 3 years. Will you give us 3 years of cut our payments in half? This is how we address our situations. We don't throw tax money at it. Thank you. I hope you'll look and know the facts. Thank you.
I appreciate the statements. Would you appreciate a response to some of those statements or some context behind that? Okay. So Chief Goodpasture, I'm not going to speak to the Cheetos that you eat and the Coke that you drink while you sit across the dais here and you just put your feet up and relax. The chief does do a lot of work, and he provides an immense amount of service for us. So I'm not going to call on Chief Goodpasture to speak to that. But there were a couple of things that were said, and I think that it's important to get the questions answered or put them in context, because the whole purpose of having this conversation right now is to get answers or to get context. And if we can't provide it now, then we'll follow up with you. Because, Mr. Bungard, I respect your passion, and you've been at every meeting videotaping. You're here now. You had yourself videotaped, and these are important. So I would prefer that we do answer them. Chief, could you speak to, if it's possible, the aspect of creating another fire district? I know it's something that we've done in the past or tried to do in the past as far as for passing a levy to have ALS. Could you talk about the nuances between creating a new fire district and passing a levy and some of the other aspects that have been considered in the past and what that would take going forward if we pursued that option?
There we go. In the recent past, we put before the public 2 levies that would have funded just the fire department. And the intent with those levies was to contract with another fire district. In the RCWs now, we could form a county fire district in DuPont using the DuPont boundaries or borders as the fire district border. But then that entity has the ability to tax at the rate of $1.50 per 1,000. And at the moment, we're asking a maintenance levy of 97.5 cents. So it would actually be more expensive to form our own fire department. However, if we did that at $1.50 based on our AV, ALS would probably be in the picture. But what we're looking at right now is just to maintain the service that we have. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. No, I know, but does that answer the question or speak to the issue? Obviously, it can keep going back and forth.
Thank you. So that's what I was saying is that we have.
Say it one more time just so everyone can hear.
What I was saying is that we as citizens and a group come together and get our state representatives to adjust or amend would be the word, the RCW for the fire boundary. Then we could merge, we could join any other fire district in the county. We could create a fire district between Steilacoom and DuPont. And as the chief said, it's going to be more, but everybody agrees. Everybody I talked to, everybody at the last town hall meeting, we will pay for ALS. We will pay to have an ambulance. That's what we want. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody wants an ambulance. We had an ambulance. This group took it away from us. That's the facts. And I don't want to argue with you. I'm just discussing it, and I'm trying to get the venue on how do we move forward and manage our situation.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I heard your question and it was answered to. The next aspect that you talked about was the extraction tax. It was something that I looked at as a solution to help us move forward. That ball's in the council's comments. And what?
We do have the extraction tax in place.
Right. And so increasing that or adjusting it is something that the council can look at. And as we heard earlier, that'll be something that will be discussed, I'm sure, of many topics at the council's workshops and see what solution that would bring. The other thing that you spoke to was filing Chapter 9, filing bankruptcy. For me, the reason I'm not pursuing that course of action is because that's not who I am as a leader. That's not who I am as a mayor. And that's not who I am as a person. And I don't believe that's who we are as a community. At least that's not the direction that I want to take us down. I've also had many conversations with our bond counsel and our other attorneys to look at that among all other options that are available. And so I'd ask you, Deanna, to talk about some of the nuances and the complexities of that, or some of the consequences, if you would.
I'm happy to. Just as a disclaimer here, I'm not a bankruptcy attorney, I'm a bond attorney, so I can speak of this issue generally. As many of you may or may not know, in state of Washington, municipalities cannot be forced to file bankruptcy. You have to have statutory authority, and it has to be voluntary bankruptcy proceedings. There are a number of nuances. It's actually a very complicated question when it comes to a lease-back transaction, such as what the city has entered into with respect to this facility and its overall finances. I think the takeaway, though, and I'm going to hand it over to Jeff Urbina, a member of the underwriting team for the city, who can give you some of the financial and market perspective on the issue. But the larger takeaway of bankruptcy and default in general is not necessarily whether it's a viable option, but what that would be in terms of a long-term effect, what the implications would be, not only on the city's credit rating, on the city's ability to access the markets down the road, the city's ability to borrow long-term down the road ever, and also what that would mean for the region. I don't know if many of you have been keeping tabs on what's been going on in the city of Wenatchee and the Wenatchee Public Facilities District, but they're currently in default on one of their financing for their larger convention center, and it's right now they're on the workout financing, and it's something that has happened in this region, and it does have long-term credit implications. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jeff, and he can talk about the implications on the larger side.
Sure, and I'll be brief. Again, Jeff Urbina with KeyBank Capital Markets. Appreciate the question. I mean, ultimately, I think Deanna did a pretty good job of it. You know, the implication of going through a bankruptcy the implications on your credit rating, which is currently an A+ at the city, are very, very large and negative. It is not a split-second decision that you make. Ultimately, one question when we go through any due diligence, whether it be a bank loan or any type of obligation that the city would take out in the future, is has the city gone through a bankruptcy? Have they defaulted on any bonds? This is a question that they will ask 30 years, 60 years from now when they go through this process. So when we talk about an implication of that magnitude, it is very large and very long. From a bankruptcy standpoint or from a credit standpoint, we talk about that. The credit costs of going through a financing, depending on which product you would ultimately use, it could drive up yields. You know, the sky's the limit. It could be 400 basis points or 4%. Could be 10%. So that could really limit any decision that would be along those lines, can limit the access to the market, limit flexibility, and have long-term negative impacts to the city. So hopefully that addressed the question. I will say one last thing. I'm going to take my KeyBank Capital Markets hat off and talk to you because Deanna and I go through a number of these processes, these forums, these decision-making processes, which are fantastic. I'm actually humbled to be part of this process and even listening in because of the back and forth. I think the direction from the mayor, the direction from the council, and then to have individuals from the community that are so involved on multiple levels, having passed, certainly past mayors speak. I think that really speaks to the culture and the unity of the community. And that I'm just humbled to hear that because we go through these processes quite a bit. We listen to a lot of dialogue back and forth. And this was very impressive from my standpoint, by all counts. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Any council comments to any of those comments that were made?
Yeah, I'd like to. You know, as we talk about the potential of filing Chapter 9 and going bankruptcy, I think it links into several other things we've discussed tonight. You know, why don't we raise business taxes? Why don't we look at different options? Quite honestly, as your council member, as I sat and looked at it, I had to put it in context of where we are as a community versus our neighbors. We have the lowest tax rate in the county, the absolute lowest. If we were at the top, if we were peaked out, if our resourcing capacity was tapped, I would have to more seriously consider other venues. But I look at it, we have the highest median income in Pierce County. We have the highest median property values in Pierce County. We have the lowest property tax rate in Pierce County. I guess I got to look in the mirror and say, am I so cheap that I'm not willing to pay for the services that I moved here to enjoy? And I mean, you know, nobody wants to pay more taxes. And I don't really like the idea of paying more taxes to not get more services. But the reality is we've gone over around a corner where we need to stop the erosion. And Dave, I agree with you. I really do. We need ALS here. We do. We absolutely do. And I think there are some options that we've got to seriously consider, and we've got to look at how to better serve the needs of this community. But I don't think this was that event. I think this is to put the fire out that was burning upstairs and look at improvement later. But you know, I'm open to anything as we move down the street, and I know there already have been discussions. But I don't think we had any choice. Well, we had a lot of choices, but I felt the best choice was to say, okay, fix this. Stop any further erosion, cover the current issues, pay your debt, maintain the current level of services. We haven't tapped out the community on property tax. We'll still be extremely low at property tax. Then let's look at economic vitality in the community. How do we encourage that? How do we grow that? Let's look at those places where we are seeing erosion in our parks, in our trails, in the community. Those are all subsequent things that have to be worked on, but we had to put the fire out first. And I do think the economy has a lot to do with it because it has a direct impact on the economic activity within the city and any growth that was anticipated that a lot of the planning was based on. But no, I don't consider Chapter 9 a viable option as long as we're sitting here at such a low tax rate. If we were at the other end of the spectrum and we had a community that was struggling to just make ends meet, I think we'd have to look at different options. But we're blessed to not be at that end. We're at the low end of this problem. And I think we're in a much better situation than many of the communities in the county and the state. I mean, within our midst, we do have the resources to solve these issues and to do what I would consider improvement in the community if we so choose. A lot of communities aren't blessed like that.
There was also one thing that I can't speak to, and that was the development agreement and the aspects there. Is there a council member or staff that would like to speak to that?
I would like to address that, and I'm sure that Bill Kingman, our planning manager, will back me up. First Industrial Realty Trust, the property around the golf course, was one of the 8 projects that were in the works in 2008. We had several projects that were fully permitted that were parked on the shelf because the economy tanked. Downtown, the Trax project is one of those projects. The Intel West 90 property is another one that was fully permitted, but it was parked. The 10-year developers agreement that we signed with First Industrial Trust Realty was so that they could, because of the economy tanking, they wanted the guarantee that they could use the same regulations to build that property. So if our codes changed or development regulations, if any of that changed, they would be grandfathered in under the existing codes when they did their preliminary plat and they got their preliminary plat approval. So that was strictly regulations as far as the development of the property. Also, one thing that hasn't come up this evening is the development of the 4.5 acres south of this property that the city owns. Panattoni, the developer of this property, was to be starting their first building on that property when this development was finished. As it was being finished, they were supposed to be starting on another building there. Because the economy tanked, they asked if they could hold off. They were making payments to us every year, the lease payment options on that property. So part of the lease payment on this building, the Civic Center property, was going to be paid in part by the lease payments of the development on the property south of us. So once again, a project that went down when the economy went down.
Additional comment, questions? Okay. Aaron?
Last one is just a question. Will the levy fix all of our budget deficits and make a sustainable funding source?
Will the levy fix, say that again, please?
Will the levy fix all of our budget deficits and make a sustainable fund source?
The answer is no, the way the question's asked. It's not going to fix all of our deficits. But it's up to us to decide what those deficits are. What it will do is temporarily solve the issue that we have of making a payment, the obligation that we have to make a payment for City Hall, the police station, the fire station, the infrastructure that our public safety services rely upon to do their jobs. It will cover that amount. And it was very important to me as I listened to the recommendations of the Finance Committee that we be very precise in what that covers. So I agree with what the council has talked about. I mentioned it earlier, we do have a revenue problem. There is a structural revenue problem in our city. And one of the biggest problems is the $770,000 payment that we have to make. And as I made my recommendation to council, as the council deliberated, the payment does cover that amount. The Finance Committee also said they saw another deficit. They said, well, as we look ahead on the horizon, we're going to lose 3 firefighters come March. They saw that as a deficit. And they wanted to cover that deficit as well, making sure that we could maintain those 3 firefighters that are currently grant funded, that will expire, that will go away if there's not a solution. And so the solution that was brought forward covers both of those deficits, the $770,000 for City Hall, for the police station, and for the fire station, and also that public safety services deficit that is on the horizon. Is it sustainable? No, because I intentionally proposed, as I listened to the people, a temporary lid lift. And what that does is that gives us time to come together as a community, just as we are doing right now, and roll up our sleeves and keep figuring this out. And this dialogue is very healthy. The dialogue that happened at the Community Finance Committee was very healthy. The dialogue that has occurred at many of these council meetings this year is very healthy, and we need to continue building on that and going forward to find a long-term solution, because this solution is temporary, and it gives us enough time to maintain services and the infrastructure that they depend upon and figure out other solutions. Some of those solutions may be like Mr. Bungert proposed. Some of those solutions may be as others are proposing. We need to give those time, we need to give those thoughtful analysis, and we need to continue moving forward together as one community. And by doing so, then we will achieve sustainability. Council, any comments to that? Councilmember Wilcox.
Yeah, I'd just like to mention that being a liaison person for the Pierce County Regional Committee, I have a chance to talk to a number of people from different cities throughout Washington, or throughout Pierce County, excuse me. And these particular cities right now at the present time, we got a deficit of $770,000, that's for sure. We're talking about some of these cities, $1 million plus debt. And they're reeling. They're getting rid of their fire department, they're getting rid of their police department, they're going bankrupt, and it goes on and on and on. We have a chance to rectify on a short-term basis our particular debt and then work on a long-term debt. So please consider what's being said here tonight.
So when I started this off, I said there was a 2-hour time limit. I've talked with our video folks and others, and they've agreed to keep the film rolling and keep listening and capturing what is said here tonight. There is no other place other than my home with my wife and child that is more important for me to be here tonight. So we've been here for 2.5 hours. We've asked some great questions. We've had some great comments. We've had some great ideas. And we will continue to vet those as we go forward. But unless there's any other comments that we have, I'd bring the meeting to a close and encourage everyone to continue this dialogue. As we said, this is a temporary solution to provide stability for our community. And there's many more conversations and many more opportunities for dialogue as we keep looking forward and moving forward together. So if anybody has any questions for me, I will be here for a while. I have office hours on Thursday, and we all know where the council is every Tuesday, not only for their formal meetings, but for their workshops. And we will pretty much be in meetings every Tuesday going forward till December as we look at different budget options and different budget scenarios and different budget priorities as we keep trying to move the city forward together. And we can't do it without you, the citizens. I have a responsibility as the mayor to oversee the administration of the city. You elect the council to represent you and be your policy-making, decision-making body. And the citizens, you're who matter. We are all temporary, but the decisions to all of the questions that you're raising is in your hands. And we look forward to keep moving forward together with an open mind, and we're all available to answer any questions, comments, and ideas that you have as we keep moving forward together. So thanks for coming tonight. I'll be around if anyone has any other questions or comments.